Welcome back to Off the Pitch, the podcast where we chat with individuals working within and shaping the game of soccer from off the pitch. Today's guest is John Guagliano. John is currently the Chief Marketing Officer of MLS side Minnesota United FC. John gave me an inside look at his career and how he started out in the NBA as a Mascot Coordinator and has ultimately worked his way up to now being at the helm of the marketing department for an MLS side. John also let me know how he and his team approach marketing, how they look to catch on to new trends, how they package and tell the story of their brand, and also how they work with companies like Make-A-Wish to fulfill campaigns like they did most recently for a young child. Now, whether you are a sports marketing fanatic like I am, or whether you just like a story of how someone has worked hard, gone from being the person who chases after a mascot for a club to now being the person at the top of that marketing chain for a different side, this is a story and an episode that I know you will not want to miss. So, with all of that said, let's start this episode. Okay, John, thank you for joining me on the podcast. As I mentioned to you, I usually have my co-host David, who's not available today, so it'll be a solo episode for me and you. But obviously, I have done a bit of digging on yourself and your background and know a bit about you now. But for anyone who's tuning in who doesn't know who you are, they've never heard of you, would you mind just giving a bit of an overview of who you are as an individual and then a bit of a walkthrough of your career so far to get everyone caught up to speed?
Sure. So I'm John Guagliano. I'm Chief Marketing Officer for Minnesota United. I've been here for about 8 years. Prior to Minnesota, I had a similar role with the Washington Nationals in baseball. Prior to that, it was the Charlotte Bobcats in basketball, which is now the Charlotte Hornets. Before that, Nashville Predators in hockey. And before that, the Charlotte Hornets. So I seem to be a glutton for punishment when it comes to jumping on early in teams' kind of timeline and trying to help them build from the bottom up.
Definitely. I want to obviously get into things and a bit of your past roles and definitely your current role for Minnesota. But what did sports kind of play in your life growing up? Take us back to John growing up and what sports looked like for you then and how that maybe influenced your career that you've now gotten into.
I very active. I was very active growing up. It was I had an older brother, 2 years older than me, and I would say anything that he played, I was going to play. So he was kind of laying the groundwork. But it was like, running around, you name it. I always joke with my wife when we had a son, I'm like, they're like dogs. You got to run them. They got to get tired. And, that was my thing. I just loved doing something. It didn't matter. We'd make up games if we have to, if we didn't have an organized thing. But, I played soccer throughout my life and all through college. I played baseball in high school. I added some rugby when I was in college because I needed something else. Because if I was not busy, I was probably going to fail out. So I needed to add another sport in there, and that was more in the spring. So I did that. And then, it really took me to my career. Like I seriously, I grew up right outside of New York City. I thought I was going to be like an investment banker or sales or something. And then I did like an internship and started doing interviews. And I'm like, this is not fun. None of this. I don't want to do this. So, I started writing down everything I was interested in doing. And on one column, and then the other column was, how do I turn it into a job? So it was just kind of funny. It would be like a sport, a sport, a sport, a sport, a sport. And I'm like, okay, how do I turn this into a job now? And that's how I ended up getting into sports as a job. I realized that I can't be in an office, like I always joke that if I'm having a bad day, I look to my left and I get to watch a soccer game. That's not so bad.
Definitely. That's definitely a nice way to put it. And anytime we've spoken with people especially those who have the office at a stadium, right? There's a few stadiums, Earthquakes, for example, up by us in the Bay Area that have their front office right there. That if they're getting stuck in the weeds of the work, they can just go and look and see, what it's all they're working for is that weekend and seeing the empty stadium that will be full. I can definitely relate to the growing up with older siblings, especially, I had two older brothers who were a good bit older than me, 5 and 7 years older. And it was, I think for the two of them, the oldest one, Stephen, it was anything he'd do, the next one would follow. And then 5 years later, I was just tagging along and trying to stick with it. So yeah, you're right. We are like dogs. and we, our mum was in care of all three of us for most of the week as a single mom. So I can't even imagine the chaos that she had to deal with the three of us running around.
Oh, she would just throw a ball in the backyard for you guys, right? And just go, come back in an hour when you're tired.
Oh yeah. The grass in our backyard got tore up. That's for sure. But that's awesome. So getting into your first role, right? So you kind of mapped out sports is what you want to get into. It's not investment banking, as we mentioned before, it's the passion, right, that you're kind of pursuing. I saw that one of your first roles or your first role with Charlotte was Mascot Coordinator. Now,
yes,
what is a mascot?
That's a real job.
Tell me about that job, because what is that? What does that entail? That first role in sports, what was that?
So, my older brother, who was kind of like my business mentor, was pretty much like, just get your foot in the door, figure it out once you get in. I'm like, okay, right? Like anything. He's like, sales, sweeping, mailroom, figure it out. Just try to get in. So that's what I did. And this opportunity came along. And at the time, Hugo the Hornet and the Phoenix Suns Gorilla were probably the top tier mascots in the NBA. And, it was my role to try to schedule him for external appearances, make sure he got to appearances on time, make sure, game day that he was going to be, ready to go, because they were entertainers. And we booked a lot of other games. So imagine being like 22 years old, your first job, and I scheduled games in Germany, Amsterdam, Australia. We did like the first ever Rock and Jock basketball game for MTV, the World Championships of basketball in Canada. And that's when the first dream team came together prior to the Olympics, right? And this was all as a young 22, 23, 24-year-old. And, it was my job to promote him and try to get him. And it was fun, but at the same time, I was doing everything I could to get out of it, to find what's my next gig? Where's my next role in the company kind of thing.
Yeah. And then I saw that, just moving on to another role that you had, especially with Charlotte, was you over time absorbed a lot of the game operation side of things and sort of having the responsibility to almost craft the atmosphere, the vibe of home games. Take me back to that job, because as I mentioned before, we jumped on, and anyone who's listened to a few episodes will know I've mentioned before, I used to work for Bay Cities, which was a single year bankrupt NISA team. And we had, I was involved with game operations, doing the marketing side of things, but we were a high school stadium, right? And we're trying to get a few hundred people in. So there's not too much activation that can be done or needs to be done. But take me back to that role with Charlotte, where you're now drafting this.
Yeah. So, it was a lot. I dabbled in the mascot world, and then I was doing game presentation, and then I was going into broadcasting, and, the game presentation side, where I kind of just dabbled in it for a while, and before I got to broadcasting, and then ended up moving to a different company and taking everything in. Your role at that point is very similar to a TV producer, right? And you're doing the same role. Your job is to tell the story of what's going on, make sure all the elements that need to get in, that are sold, get in, and how do you create the best atmosphere you can without taking away from the game, right? And that's kind of like what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to orchestrate to get the crowd up when you want them up, and quiet when you need them quiet, and you're trying to get them to the right points in the game, right? But you also don't want to be intrusive of their game. The whole thing is you're trying to enhance their experience at the game. And NBA probably does one of the better jobs of the orchestration. If you follow the New York Knicks, every time the other team had the ball, it was you'd hear the defense drum, and that Madison Square Garden was going crazy every time, right? Like they knew it, and that's the stuff that you see, and during the course of your career, you try to build, right? Like what's going to be our traditions, what's going to be our thing that our crowd expects. And then, how do we keep it fresh? That's always the hardest part I always say internally, if you work for the team, you get tired of things a lot quicker than if you're outside because you're seeing it probably 50 more times a day than anybody else. You're expecting it, where not everybody's coming to every game. Not everybody is watching every second or actually focusing on everything that you're doing, right? Like there's so much going on. So you're trying to balance that. And that's like the fun part about the job. And what I enjoy about it is it has a very strong business side of things because that's where you're trying to manage all the corporate partner community and internal assets to make sure you get everything in, and then you're trying to figure out like where's the super entertainment, and when you combine the two, it's a win-win, right? Like when you could take something that's super corporate and turn it into like a big part of the game and people are expecting it, that's just amazing for that partner.
Definitely. That's something we speak about with anyone who's touched the game operations side of things that we've had on in the past. Is it's always the idea that as fans, to your point, some people they might only ever come to one game. Some people might be season ticket holders and they're there every week, or some people might come a few times a season. But generally speaking, fans that enter an arena, enter a stadium, they just kind of expect everything to be there. They expect the banners to be there. They expect the music to be there. They expect that orchestration to happen. But not too many people think about what goes in to behind all of that. How there's actual, there's people who have spent all week, all month, all career building and preparing for these moments. And they're now, putting in front of you, but you don't think twice about what happened behind all of it. So it's always interesting for us to speak to people who are behind that. And one thing I've been curious with different people is where do they get, when you have the opportunity to sort of build from scratch or iterate to your point of view, you wanted to stay fresh, want to try new things. How much of those new things have come from internal ideas, brainstorming, and how much of it has come from taking inspiration from other organizations, other teams, other sports, other countries, where you're sort of picking pieces? Because ultimately that's, how a lot of things happen is you sort of copy this area, you piece different things together, and when you copy or replicate things from 10 different organizations, that's now unique. You're not just a copy and paste of someone else, but you've taken the best parts of multiple. So how has that looked back then? And we'll get into it with Minnesota, of course, but when it comes from inspiration versus your own ideas.
Yeah, it's not rocket science, right? Like it's entertainment. And a good idea when it comes to entertainment comes from anywhere and everyone. It's being open. But even to a point where kind of your point about like other teams, taking things from other teams and looking at it. I've always looked at it as if someone's got a good idea, take a look at it. But how do you make it yours? Right? Like, how do we make it a little bit more custom to us as opposed to just taking the exact same thing and doing it? So, like, can you make it better? Right? Like, and then when someone sees it, they're going to be like, I think I saw that somewhere, but this is so different, right? Like, and that's kind of what you want to get to. Like, but, back in the day, like everybody was doing kiss cam. Like, you don't need to reinvent that wheel. You need to do a timeout. You got it, right? Like, it's easy. But then there's other things that, where you have, got pop culture, right? Like, how do you incorporate like the most trending things, not just on social media, but in general, right? Like even back then, you had pop culture. You just had to work a little bit harder to see it. And then you try to incorporate it. And, it's the amount of time that, and honestly, like whether you're a creative or when you're doing that presentation, you're really putting yourself out there to be criticized. Right. Like, so I always like, tip my hat to the group because you have to have thick skin and, failure is okay. That's what I tell them. You're allowed to fail at it. Right. But just make sure that you failed because it didn't work, not because you weren't prepared. There's a difference.
That's a really, really great point. And as when we've spoken to different people about maybe the culture that they've been building in their own organizations, in their own departments, it's been interesting to hear that different leadership and the message that different individuals are giving to their team about, how, because you have to show up every single day. The team, the games will not wait at the weekend. During the week, they're going to happen. So you have to show up and get it done. So I guess on that point of culture, you've obviously worked in different teams, in different leagues and different sports. So how has the front office culture or the values behind front offices differed with the different teams you've been a part of?
Certain sports are a little bit more intense. NBA was intense, right? In a good way. It's just the expectations are there, the eyeballs were there, so it's very intense. But so you have the sport culture that kind of bleeds in, and then you have the company culture that bleeds in. And just like on the field, right? If you play tight, if you play like you're going to make a mistake or you're worried about making a mistake, you're going to make a mistake. You're not going to play at your best. But when your mind is free and you make a mistake and you move on, you're going to have a better game. You're going to be more creative. And it's the same thing from, whether it's a game presentation, a TV broadcast, or even for your designers or producers, right? Like giving them that creative freedom to create a masterpiece every time, right? Like, and if it doesn't work, again, it didn't work. Move on. You can make fun of them that it didn't work, but you're making fun of them in a fun way, not in a, criticizing way.
It's been interesting, so far in my early career, only a few years into it, but seeing the similarities, and especially from the mentality side of things from sports. And obviously I played soccer my entire life through college. And now seeing the team environments that I'm working within, and that idea of, to your point as a player, if you're scared you're going to make a mistake, you're going to make a mistake and it's going to eat you alive. And you're going to think that the entire world knows you made this mistake and they're going to hold it against you. But if you are a winger and you're not worried about making mistakes, you understand that just because you didn't beat the defender this one time, you're not having a bad game. Right. Only you, in most cases, are going to remember that you didn't win that 1v1. Everyone else will forget about it because you have another opportunity 2 minutes later and there's tons of other things going on the pitch. And the same happens in the front office, and especially when it comes to your point of campaigns and content. You internally are the ones who know everything that's happening. From the outside, someone might only see 1 in every 6 pieces of content you publish. So if somewhere in there, one didn't go viral, one didn't hit the KPIs you were looking for, only you know it. And it's also therefore okay that if it didn't, because chances are no one else really noticed anyway, only you did. That's definitely been a very interesting thing that I've been wrapping my head around, especially when I'm in marketing and doing advertising campaigns, that when it doesn't work, it feels like the world is crashing down on you, but that only feels that way to you. No one else is putting that on you. So that's interesting. And so now that you are able to, you're in a position obviously where you're building and you've built your own department, you have the marketing team around you. When it comes to looking to hire people to bring them into this culture that you're building and that you've built, beyond technical expertise and work background, because that's obviously important, but what are some of the character traits that you're really looking for when it comes to hiring someone for your own department in sports, but specifically marketing and all of that storytelling side of things that comes with it?
Yeah, I always look for hard work, passion, and integrity. Everything else they're going to learn. Everything else they should already know, right? Like depending on what position you're going to bring them in. But if you hire someone with those 3 traits, I always say that they're going to be harder on themselves than I will ever be. They'll push themselves harder than because their passion and their hard work is just driving them to be the best that they can be. And those are also, those are unteachable, right? Like those are characteristics that I feel like people either have or they don't. It's hard to teach hard work, right? Like, you know, and but in the end, they're gonna push themselves a lot harder than you will. And sometimes you have to be there to get them to stop pushing themselves.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Of when you bring the right people in, you don't need to push them, right? There, and to get into a professional sports organization, especially one in the major league of the sport that they're in, everyone wants to work for that team. So to even just get in, you will have already had to work hard. So it's already there. That was something we had Uriel Martinez from LA Galaxy, their CRO,
Mhm.
and he was talking about how he's sort of instilled naturally that no one wants to lose their spot in the organization, the same way you wouldn't want to lose your starting position on the field or your spot on the bench to a reserve player, because you've worked hard to get there and now you want to keep it but also move forward. So it's that makes total sense that sports front offices are just filled with people who have this sort of naturally ingrained in them.
Oh yeah.
So obviously let's fast forward a bit and get up to Minnesota United, the real
Mhm.
talking point that we're here to discuss. So you joined the organization, I believe, in 2016, and then
Mhm.
the club went into MLS in 2017. So to your point, when
Mhm.
we got started, you like to get in early and sort of build from the
Mhm.
ground up. So how did that opportunity first of all come about to move to Minnesota United and start it from the ground up in the MLS? And what was it that really enticed you to take
Yeah.
the opportunity, given you had a good background already and you're moving to another new sport, a new location? What was it that stood out and attracted you to come into the club?
I think first and foremost, I love the game, right? Like it, and that was kind of a big driving factor. But loving the game, um, a new team in the league of MLS. They came, they were in NASL and they moved to MLS, and then opening up a new building. Um, so you're really kind of building the brand from the ground up. You have you're part of a project, of a creating a cathedral of soccer in an area that didn't have one, right? And all those little things. And I think it just gets you like every day is not the same, when you're doing that from the beginning, and it is intense. You're not saving lives. We just act like we are during that time frame, but it's fun. But you're truly like, you're setting up processes. You're like working on new traditions, like what are going to be our traditions? We already have this from, the NASL days. Okay, this is carrying over. What are we doing, right? And you're building this brand, from truly the ground up. And I don't know. I don't think there's if you put me in a job that I had to do the same thing every day, I would probably lose my mind.
Definitely. And that's the beauty of to your point, every day is different. It's not a copy
Mhm.
and paste work schedule where everything is the same. And that's why I love it. And I'm sure it sounds like that's why you love it, but I think that's what keeps everyone in it, right? Because if you don't want that life, it'll become very clear very quick that maybe you do instead want a bit of an easier ride when it comes to your
Yep.
job. So this in terms of the MLS then as a whole, right back
Mhm.
in 2017 when you joined, that's also the year that I moved to the country. And I've
Mhm.
noticed in the last 7 years that I've been in the country how the league has grown and the attention that it's gotten, going from coming from out of country and seeing the MLS as this retirement league, this lower level, this thing over in America, and then moving here and seeing it grow, seeing it change, and obviously, people like Messi that are here now, really shining a light on it. But what did the league look like back then, when the team was
Mhm.
starting in it, compared to now and how it's changed? What did the landscape look like in terms of trying to obtain fans for this league that wasn't as big as it is now, and a new team pretty much, in a new area?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think I jumped on board probably at the right time where it was just straight up trajectory for MLS at that point, right? They had a plan to add all these new teams to grow the league, and every team, were putting in these amazing buildings, right? Um, and how they built their brands from, you had Atlanta coming in, you have LAFC, Austin, Cincinnati, and Cincinnati had a rough start, but look at them now. They're probably one of the best teams in the league, right? Nashville. I mean, it's Miami. How can I forget that? And each one of them are not only pushing, like they're trying to push, they want the best building. They want the best experience as they're coming into the league. These are their expectations, right? But they're also pushing the other teams to be better, right? Because you're like, this team's coming in and they're coming in hot. Like, what are we gonna do? Right? Like, how are we gonna adjust? So you're always adjusting. And I think, like I said, from when I got into the league and all the teams that were added and how that was pushing the entire league up was just amazing to see, but when you're playing in these soccer specific stadiums and like each one seems to be keep getting better than the one before them, the experience that the fans are part of, it's special. And that's why people love attending the games.
Definitely.
And it's
And
truly
we
organic
had,
too. That's the best part, that it's an organic, like the crowd is actually defining it. It's your job in the game presentation side to not mess it up. That's your role.
yeah, you have to lay the platform there and then hope that the people come into it. And that the point, the note of stadiums, right, and specifically the soccer specific stadiums that are thankfully now, almost a requirement and then things moving forward. We had Keelan Carr on a couple of weeks ago, who's an analyst for MLS now. He was speaking about, when he was growing up, there wasn't soccer specific stadiums, right? You weren't growing up in this environment compared to Europe, where you're growing up in pretty much every single town. There's a soccer stadium, there's a football stadium, whether it's small team, big team, there's a football stadium to go to and watch games. And the difference now for people growing up, that a lot of the big cities, you take Atlanta, for example, kids are now just being used to these stadiums being filled compared to, 20, 30 years ago when that just wasn't the case. And the difference that having these stadiums now plays such a crucial role. And obviously for Minnesota, you got your own stadium. And in 2019, you open the doors and you'll have fans coming in. But prior to that, you were in University of Minnesota's football stadium, which is, I believe, more than double the size of what Allianz is. Take us back to the efforts and the campaigns behind trying to fill the big stadium, and then how that changed when you got your own stadium and you were able again to start from scratch, a clean slate of building the environment, attracting the right fans, but ultimately having a lot less seats to work with compared to your max capacity before. And take us back to those days.
Yeah, I mean, doing our games at the University of Minnesota, right? It was 50,000. We focused mainly on the lower bowl, except for like a few games that we would try to go upstairs. But the atmosphere itself, right? Like it was not the same, right? Like not just because of the building, but there's football lines. It's not our stadium, not our home per se, right? It's like you're renting a house at that point, but the people still live in it. But so we kind of have two trains running, where you're selling your current, the first 2 years, and then we're focusing on positioning ourselves for 2019 and beyond, right? To not hinder our growth by overcommitting to something, right? So it's almost like you're starting over to do that. And the way it worked is the lower bowl, I believe, at University of Minnesota was in the 22 to 23-ish range, and Allianz Field is 19,006. So you could literally take the entire Allianz Field and put it in just the lower bowl of the U. So that just tells you how intimate it is, right? Like, so that was a big part of the process of just trying to build the fan base in those first 2 years, and hopefully you're selling hope. That's what we were doing. We were selling hope. Our hope is once we get into the building, you're going to see how different it's going to be, the entire experience. So, as a marketer, that was a tough job because that's your job, right? Like you're selling current and you're selling the future at the same time.
Yeah. How did the pressure feel? That first game in the new stadium of you had, set these promises, these expectations, and then the day has come, the first game. How did that feel and seeing it all actually play out?
Well, the first game we played at the U, it snowed about a foot. And then the first game we played at Allianz Field the night before, I think it snowed about a foot. And they were cleaning snow off the field. Like it was such an amazing Minnesota backdrop. So good news is I think the snow distracted us so much that it took some of the pressure off because we were so worried about the weather. But I think like as far as the pressure goes, there was a really strong plan that was put in place of like doing all these kind of soft events to kind of test the building as we were going along the way, each step of the way. And I don't think there was, if we didn't do that, the pressure would have been probably unbearable. But until you really open it up and get it going and get 20,000 people in there and everything's running at the same time, it's like, if everything runs at the same time, is it going to work? Right? Like, so you still didn't know, but I mean, that building is amazing and it's still held up in the years that it's gone. It's still, one of my favorites in the league. And maybe I'm biased, but I do try to see a lot of the stadiums.
Yeah. So when it came to, obviously we've mentioned you have the NBA arena where you were in charge of the atmosphere, the fan engagement, the orchestration, and you now had another clean slate with the new stadium. Going back to the idea of taking inspiration from other examples and doing a bit of, field research, maybe going to stadiums, feeling the atmosphere, taking pieces from them. Were there any clubs, in the US and different leagues or different countries that you did take some inspiration from when it came to crafting another new game atmosphere and a new environment for fans in the new stadium?
Yeah, like with the new stadium, the nice part about like Minnesota is because of the minor league side, there were some things that were already in place, like traditions. So we were able to bring those in. And then there was other things that kind of happened organically too. Like on corner kicks, our fans take their scarves and just kind of when we're taking a corner and just all start going crazy. And that all happened to take off because we had a game on ESPN and the ESPN director ended up seeing what was happening and ended up panning out and telling him to pan out and shoot wide. So more and more people. So I ended up telling our internal director, hey, for corner kicks, why don't you try doing this? Let people see what we're doing. And then it kind of organically takes off. It started from them. We just showed it so everybody could see it. So now it's like, we always joke when you're coming to a game, it's like get there early so you can see all the pregame stuff. Make sure you have a scarf because you're going to need it and learn the words to Wonderwall, right? Like that's like the tips that I try to give people when you're going. But like a true tradition, it's hard to create, right? Like yourself, right? A lot of it has to be fan driven, player driven, moment driven. The key is paying attention to when it happens, right? Like, and how you do it. And, that's kind of what happened with the scarves on corner kicks. Where you start paying attention, you start using the scoreboard to show people what's happening, and then people start mimicking that behavior. And it's truly fan driven because we didn't do anything. You know what I mean? Like we didn't force it. And that's what I love about like an MLS game. It is controlled by them, the noise, everything else. We do some music pregame, we do all of our elements. You try to create a nice build up to the game. The game happens, stay away, let the fans do their thing. Halftime, you're kind of back in. Second half goes, again, the atmosphere takes over, try to enhance it. Game ends, what are you going to do? Right? Like, so that's kind of like our formula. The key is being, we do take stuff for other teams, like you said. You may look at it, it's like, okay, this is a great way to show stats on the board. How do they break up the board, and how do we incorporate more partners? We do a lot of that from a lot of site surveys to see, okay, what do fans want? How do we get more information out to them? And then how can we deliver it?
Yeah, that is the beauty of sports, but specifically soccer, because you can't touch anything during the first and second half. The game just has to happen. That you put so much, not at risk, but you put it all in the hands of the fans to create the atmosphere. It's so different than any other industry, right? Where, every game, you think of it as a go to market, for a new product. You control so much of, selling a SaaS or a product. Mm-hmm. But when it's sports, and specifically soccer, you can't control anything. You can sort of create the house for it, but you can't control what happens on the field. You can't control what happens in the stands with the fans. You just have to make sure that you've set a bit of a foundation to let, what you hope to happen. And if something else happens, you can't change it. It's going to happen. What have been some of those other organic or natural things that the fans have done, or they maybe do consistently, or they've done in the past, that just stood out to you as like, wow, was not expecting that, but glad that happened?
There was something on social media one year where I saw some fans talking about, wouldn't it be fun if they played this song after halftime? Mr. Brightside is the song. So I saw it, I mentioned it to the game presentation person. I said, what do you think? He's like, yeah, I'll try it. And we played it, and you just saw the reaction. You saw them singing, and that was kind of cool, right? To see that reaction, and like, where, again, it was all started from them. We were just paying attention. And that's what we try to do, is to see what's happening, see where we can amplify, right? Or see where we need to stay out of the way. And some of it is just a good relationship with your fans and your supporters, and some of it is paying attention.
Yeah. What does the sort of working relationship look like with the supporter groups, the fan groups? Obviously, there's the general majority are just individual fans, but you have groups, and you have fans, fan clubs. What does that relationship look like to listen to their feedback, implement what you can, but overall just work side by side, as opposed to, them telling you what to do or you telling them what to do?
Yeah, it's kind of funny though. It's a little bit of church and state, right? Like neither side wants to be told what to do, so to speak. So you try to see where you can work together. And you just try to have a really good relationship. For us, it's more about, how do we have a good relationship? So if there's a problem from either side, it's going to be handled the right way, right? That's what we try to focus on. Not necessarily like, you guys should do this because we're doing this, or we need you to do this kind of thing. And instead, it's more like, we had an issue with this. How can we fix it? Right? Like that, and we have, we have a couple of people in the office that work very closely with the supporters. They have regular meetings, scheduled meetings, and then we try to bring different people into the meeting from the organization. We'll bring our chief soccer officer in. We've brought our head coach in. We've brought our community person in. We've brought our match day presentation person in, right? Like, so we bring all these people in so they can talk about things or hear things. And there are times where they may want to do something where maybe it's a march, or maybe it's a chant or whatever. And we're here to listen, right? Like, and the better the relationship, the better it is. And, we're allowed to disagree. Our goal is not to be disagreeable, right? Like, so, no is not a bad word, but it's how you say it on either side.
And that's, ultimately what makes or breaks working relationships. It's not how are you collaborating when times are good, when everything is going smooth. It's what happens when things aren't going well, right? When something unexpected happens, when COVID, something big and problematic that either affects just the club or the whole landscape. How do you then work together in those situations is obviously what really sets the tone for moving forward. And I've seen, obviously I've looked online and looked at social media, the website, your own profile on things like LinkedIn to get an idea of just how much community engagement the club is doing, what it is doing a fantastic job of. And I think that's another thing that's so different about working in sports is, you know, when you're working for a big corporate company, you might go out and do community things just to, in many cases, probably check a box, right? The organization has signed up for something. They have to send X amount of people. But when it comes to clubs and sports teams, it's completely different because those are your fans that you're going out in community with. You're building relationships with people who maybe aren't fans, but will be after this event, but that wasn't the goal of the participation. What have been some of your favorite, you know, community initiatives that you've been involved in, either at Minnesota or past clubs that have really stuck with you? Because I think that that's such a fun aspect of sports that obviously, again, I got a quick glimpse into for a year with the NISA team, but I really enjoyed that. So what have been some of your favorite ones of those?
Yeah, all the teams I've worked for, I think their community departments have done an amazing job. The ones that stand out for me the most, when I was in Charlotte, we ended up refurbishing a basketball court before that became really popular, right? And it was in a neighborhood that needed it. And you know, I think the community came together, and that was pretty special. And then in Minnesota, I think we've with some of our partners, we just redid 2 fields for a community with Toro, and that was amazing. That's one of my favorite too, because you're really changing. Like you went from like kind of a wilderness style field or a goat ranch, as I call it, to like really nice grass, right? Like, and to go into a community and do that, to give them a safe place to play. And we've done that. We've done mini pitches from basketball courts to actual fields. And I love doing that. And that one really fits into our why. Our why is, you know, to promote soccer, the world's game, and through it inspire and unite our community, right? Like that's what we try to do. How do we promote the game? How do we bring, you know, give people an opportunity to play the game in a safe environment? That's what we're trying to do. But that was special. And then I would say the most recent one that we did a Make-A-Wish, where both teams allowed Carter to on the field and score a goal. And I mean, I don't think I received more texts from people saying the game hasn't started, but I'm bawling. I'm just crying right now. Right. Like, and I will say, like, it was so rewarding to be able to do that, you know, and such an honor. Because that was probably the most pressure I think I felt, because you're really taking somebody who wants to do something, you know, and it's very sensitive, and you're trying to see what you can do. And there was not one person saying, you know, do we need to do all that? It was more, what can we do more? Can we do more? How can we help? Even DC United, how can we help? Right? Yeah. Like, you know, so I thought that tells you a lot about, I think, the soccer community.
Yeah. And I'm familiar with what you're talking about with the Make-A-Wish one with Carter. And I watched the video yesterday, the recap video, which, you know, even just seeing the video is moving, and the emotion that something like that can bring out. But for anyone who's listening or watching that has no idea what that campaign, that project was, talk a bit more about that, because it was something I had noted down that I really wanted to shine a light on, because the video is amazing. And it's another aspect of, again, I don't think, you know, companies like Meta and Google are getting Make-A-Wish requests, right? But sports is different than you do. So talk about that project, take us through it, and paint a picture for anyone who's listening of what that was, what it entailed.
Yeah, so Carter was a 7-year-old who his Make-A-Wish was to score a goal at Allianz Field in front of his grandparents. Carter's grandparents are from Minnesota, or great grandparents, I believe, are from Minnesota, but his family was out in Arizona. So we made contact. We were trying to figure out how to make this happen, and they ended up, we worked on a game. It was a midweek game because that worked out best for the family because I think they were going to be in town. And we went to our chief soccer officers on both sides and said, this is what we like to do. Right. And what we wanted to do was delay the start of the game by a few minutes and have Carter go on the field in the starting 11 with both teams on the field. And the referees would blow the whistle and someone would pass it to Carter and he dribbled down the field and scored a goal. And DC United's goalie, I mean, he played it up. I mean, he was 6'2", 6'3", big, imposing, and Carter put it right between the legs and he dove and everything. And I mean, that was pretty special for a professional athlete who's getting ready to go into battle to understand that moment that this was more important, and ran to the corner after he scored, did a goal celebration, came to off to the sideline. His family was on the side. I mean, everybody was bawling, and it was pretty special in the sense of like, making a wish come true.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, anyone who hasn't seen the video that might be listening to this, go and look it up, go and find it, because it is really special. And the thing that stood out with me the most about like just Carter as an individual was he almost enjoys that he enjoys that his life is hard, but he enjoys overcoming the hard things. And I saw, within the video, he mentions after he scores the goal that he wanted it to be harder, that he wanted it to be more difficult to score the goal than it was. Is just, speaks volumes about him as a child, as his character, battling an illness with his brother. Yeah, for anyone who hasn't seen it, go and watch it. But on a storytelling side of that project, obviously doing it is one thing, capturing it and telling the story, which you did so gracefully in the video. Talk a bit about behind the scenes of capturing all of that and building this story, this narrative around Carter, his brother, their family, and the wish, behind the scenes of actually putting the video and everything around it together.
Yeah, our production team is amazing, first and foremost, and it's led by somebody who has, national, international experience. And we're just fortunate that she decided to come back home because of her family, and have her kids grow up near her family. And the plan was in place from the beginning, right? The communication, it was all there. Being able to sit down with the family, as luck would have it, the family was actually right next to where we were when we were in Arizona training, because we have to leave Market to train. And that was not by design. They were literally in the same town as our team was training, and our head of production was there as well. So we were able to capture some footage then as well, which worked out really nice for us. And then, like I said, we have such a great team. They know how to tell the story the right way. And, I don't think it could have been done any better. Like, it's just so hard to explain. Like, that's those stories. There's so much responsibility on, the producer and the executive producer when you're telling a story like that, because you're trying to make sure that you talk about the tough times and really what the person's going through, but you also want to show everything else, all their accomplishments. So it's like I said, there's a lot of responsibility on you to tell that story and tell it right. And I think our team killed it.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, absolutely nailed it. hit the storytelling out of the park. I mean, as I mentioned, the character of Carter himself and how he, comes across was definitely told so well in the video.
Such a positive outlook on with everybody, from him to his family. And I guess that's the only way you can take that on.
Yeah, definitely. And to change pace a bit, obviously the storytelling side of things that we're on is something that is, especially with social media, with the change in the media landscape, and especially the idea of having an owned audience. What have been some of the trends, I guess, that you have seen in sports business, soccer business as a whole, but particularly the marketing, branding, storytelling side of things that have kind of come from the last, the growth of the last 5, 6, 7 years, and obviously pushing forward? What have been some of the big trends that you've seen, you've jumped on, or things that you might see in the future?
Yeah, the whole landscape of content in general has changed, right? Because you have your own platforms, and you're trying to everything from, you got TikTok, and each platform is different, right? Like, and you're trying to tell a different story. So as far as the trends goes, like, you're trying to balance the snackable content, the quick 5 to 7, fun, goofy, entertaining, to true long form storytelling and everything in between. And then you're trying to balance all the partners, right? Like, so it's where's the partner going to fit in with all this? So, you're most content, the best content is going to be the shorter, right? Like, that's the people that are going to see the most of it, right? Like, everybody in this world, I think, has 7 to 10 seconds of like an attention span. So so those type of trends, with that, to trying to balance the 7 to 10, because if the only thing you're pushing out is 7 to 10, you're going to lose some of the people who truly want to learn more about the team, right? Like, so that is the balancing of the trends. I would say the biggest, the trends that you're seeing is there's so many like videos and things that you'll see like all teams doing, because it just becomes very popular, right? Like, so we're going to try this, we're going to try this, we're going to try this. And it's like keeping up with that is not easy. Like, having a content team and a social team, and sometimes that's both and the same, to keep their eye on it. And then how do you make it you, and how do you get it done, right? Like, it's those types of, trends that are really hard to stay on top of, because that is all like in the moment. And I will tell you, like, all these people have day jobs. And what I mean by that is they have all other responsibilities. It's not just pushing out the fun stuff, right? Like, of course, that's the best part of their job in their minds, but they still have to do like all these, initiatives and responsibilities and corporate videos and features. And, so it's a jack of all trades when you're talking about like how you're going to staff that department.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, to your point, you see, from a fan or public perspective, you see the fun Instagram, the fun TikTok videos, but that's the same team that are putting together that Make-A-Wish video. They're the same team putting together all the corporate partner activations.
Yep.
That are not, just fun, new trends that you're coming up with. They are very serious, strict
Yep.
rules and guidelines. And being able to be diverse in your skill set, being able to switch between things is so important in sports. And on that note, I guess, about you yourself. So as we know, you're at the helm of marketing for Minnesota United, and you started out as a mascot coordinator. So that's a big journey. That's a big jump. What is it about you as an individual, again, your own traits, your own characteristics beyond your expertise, that you think have allowed you to propel the way you have and grow throughout your career and get to what is a very, very high level, role in the industry?
Yeah, I think for me it's definitely my parents. Like, I would say that they are kind of my, my heroes, my mentors, so to speak. And, they came over separately from Italy. They met here. My dad owns an auto body shop. He's 87 years old, and he's still putting in 10 hours a day. So that tells you the hard work is ingrained, right? Like, my mom would work 2 jobs to help take care of the family, where she could. And, to see like, it's that type of passion and that type of, where you're really, hard work is just hard work. That's the way they looked at it, that you're supposed to do that. You get up early, you do it. Not a big deal. And I think because of that, like, I was talking to someone about this, like, if you can work, I think Kobe Bryant said this, and I think Tom Brady has said this, right? It's like, if you can work harder than the people around you, you're going to be better, right? So, I think for me, it was just ingrained. It was expected to, have a job, get up early. I joke that, if my mom had to do something and my dad had to watch me, I was at his auto body shop sanding fenders. I wasn't doing a coloring book. He'd be like, "What are you doing? You're in the office. Get out here. I got work for you." I was 6 years old, kind of thing, right? Like that was how he, when he had to watch me, when he had to work, right? Like he put me to work. Um, so that's just always been ingrained in me. So I think kind of having, blue collar parents, when I see how hard my dad works working on cars and I get to, you know, go to a soccer game or go to a baseball game or a hockey game, like I can't complain. I got nothing to complain about.
Yeah. Yeah. To your point you made, earlier of it feels like it's the most important thing ever, right? Whatever anyone is doing, it feels, and it is incredibly important, but it feels like you're saving lives. But at the end of the day,
Mhm.
it's a soccer team putting on an entertainment, putting on a game. Yeah, that's unbelievable. And so I guess it feels like time has just passed by in this past hour, but I don't want to keep you for too long. But we've spent a lot of time obviously looking ahead, looking at the future, speaking about some past campaigns and activations that you've done and things you've been involved in. As you look back on your career so far, and you obviously have so much ahead of you, but when you look back, what is, one instance or one thing you've done in the past that you are personally the most proud of yourself in? Not
Mhm.
a team you've had underneath you, an organization you've been a part of, but you yourself that you can look back and have pride about.
That is a great question. It's funny because when I look back at the stuff that I accomplished, or you try to remember, I think it's you remember the relationships. That's what I'm probably most proud of, right? Like there are so many people along the way, no matter what industry I've been in, that you've met, and I think sports, it's such a small industry. So I think, I'm probably most proud of the relationships I have. If we do something well, all of a sudden my phone's blowing up from like 10 people I worked with and other places. Hey, congrats, congrats. And that goes a long way, right? Like it's the same thing. If I see somebody, wins a World Series and I work with them, I'll send them a note, right? Like so I would probably say it's the relationships that I'm probably most proud of. Because that seems to be the things that stick around the most in your head. And it's so funny because you think about all the little things and you think about all the stress that you went under and how hard, but the only things I can remember are the relationships.
Yeah, that's been, I think a common trend of when we've
Yeah.
asked people, a question like that or a similar one. It's not, and we've spoken with people who've come from organizations that are extremely successful on the field, or if they've been a part of NBA or
Mhm.
other sports teams, have been extremely successful. And the championship, the big cup win is amazing, but it lasts until the next game or the start of the
Yep.
next season, and then it's you start again. But it is that lasting impact that you make on people that really is the most important thing. Because the championships, they go on down in the history books, but it's the impact that someone feels inside them that is always, the more important thing. That's awesome. Well, John, this has been amazing. Again, it feels like time has just disappeared when I look up at the clock and see that we're an hour in. So I don't want to hold you for any longer. This has been, again, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your insights, your stories. I do, again, anyone who hasn't seen the Make-A-Wish video, go and watch it. It's unbelievable. That's something I'm glad we spoke about. That really stood out to me when I was, looking into in your background. But yeah, John, thank you for being here, sharing your insights and being a part of moving the game forward, which, myself, David, who's usually with me, and anyone that we have that's always listening, we're here because we love the game, we love the business side, because that's such a core of moving the sport ahead and getting it to where it needs to be, particularly here in the US. So thank you for playing a big part in all of that.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching this episode of Off the Pitch. Don't forget to drop a follow or subscribe on the podcast platform you're listening from. That helps us bring stories like these to your ears each and every week. And if you have a minute, leave a review as well, as that helps us grow the Off the Pitch community and bring even more exciting guests on. See you in the next one.